Eddard Stark had left before dawn. Septim Ordain informed Susanna as they broke their fast. The king sent for him. The king sent for him. Another hunt, I do believe. There are still wild orchards in these lands, I am told. I never seen an orchard, Susanna said, feeding a piece of bacon to a lady under the table. The direwolf took it from her hand as delicate as the queen. Septim Ordain sniffed in disapproval. A noble lady does not feed dogs at her table, she said, breaking off another piece of the comb and letting the honey drip down onto her bread. She's not a dog, she's a direwolf, Susanna pointed out as Lady licked her fingers with a rough tongue. Anyway, father said we can keep them with us if we want. The scepter was not appeased. You're a good girl, Susanna, but do you vow when it comes to a creature you're as willful as your sister Arya? She scowled. And where is Arya this morning? She wasn't hungry, Susanna said, knowing full well that her sister had probably stolen down to the kitchen hours ago and wheeled a breakfast out of some cook's boy. Do remind her to dress nicely today. A grey velvet, perhaps. We are all invited to the ride with the Queen and the Princess Marcelia in the royal wheelhouse, and we must look our best. Susanna already looked at her best. She had brushed out her long auburn hair until it shone, and picked her nicest blue silks. She had been looking forward to today for more than a week. It was a great honor to ride with the Queen, and besides, Prince Geoffrey might be there. Her brother, just thinking it made her feel a strange flutter inside, even though they were not married for years and years. No, they were not married for years and years. Susanna did not really know Geoffrey yet, but she was already in love with him, and he was all she had ever dreamt her prince should be, tall and handsome and strong, with hair like gold. She treasured every chance to spend time with him, few as they were. The only thing that scared her about today was Arya. Arya had a way of ruining everything. You never know what she would do. I'll tell her, Susanna said uncertainly, but she'll dress the way she always does. She hoped it wouldn't be too embarrassing. May I be excused? You may. Septim Ordain helped her to more bread and honey, and Susanna slid from the bench. Lady followed her at her heels as she ran from the inn's common room. Outside stood for a moment amidst the shouts and curses of the creak of the wood. Wheels, as the men broke down and the tents prevailed, loaded the wagons for another day's march. The inn was a sprawling 3-story structure with a pale stone and the biggest that Susanna has ever seen. But even so, it had accommodations for less than a third of the king's party, which had swollen more than 400 with the additional her father's household, and the free riders who just joined them on the road. She found Arya on the banks of the Trident, trying to hold Nymeria still while she brushed dried mud from her fur. The direwolf was not enjoying the process. Arya was wearing the same riding leather she had worn yesterday and the day before. You better put on something pretty, Susanna told her. Septim Ordain said so. We're traveling in the Queen's wheelhouse with the Princess Marcelia today. I'm not, Arya said, trying to brush a tangled out of Nymeria's matted grey fur. McCallan and I am going to ride upstream and look for the rubies at the ford. Rubies, Susanna said, lost. What rubies? Arya gave her a look like she was so stupid. Ragnar's rubies. This is where King Robert killed him and won the crown. Susanna regarded her scrawling little sister in disbelief. You can't look for rubies. The princess is expecting us. The Queen invited us both. I don't care, Arya said. The wheelhouse doesn't even have windows. You can't see a thing. What could you want to see? Susanna said, annoyed. She had been thrilled by the invitation, and her stupid sister was going to ruin everything, just as she feared. It's all just fields and farm and holdfasts. "It is not," Arya said stubbornly. "If you come with us sometimes, you'd see." "I hate riding," Susanna said fervently. "All it does is get you soiled, dusty, and sore." Arya shrugged. "Hold still," she snapped at Nymeria. "I'm not hurting you." And then to Susanna she said, "We were crossing the neck. I counted 36 flowers I've never seen before, and my car showed me a lizard lion." Susanna shuddered. They had been 12 days crossing the neck and rumbling down the crooked crossway through the endless black dogs, and she had hated every moment of it. The air had been damp and clammy, and the crossway so narrow they could not even make a proper camp at night. They had to stop right at the crossroad. A dense thicket of half-drawn trees pressed close around them, branches dripping with curtains of pale fungus. Huge flowers bloomed in the mud and floated on the pool of the stagnant water, but if you were stupid enough to leave the crossway to pluck them, there was quicksand waiting to suck you down, and the snakes watched from the trees, and the lizard lions floated half-submerged in the water, like black logs with eyes and teeth. No one of which stopped Arya, of course. One day she came back grinning her horsey grin, her hair all tangled and her clothes covered in mud, clutching a raggedy bunch of purple and green flowers for her father. Susanna kept hoping he would tell Arya to behave herself and act like a high-born lady she was supposed to be. But he never did. He only hugged her and thanked her for the flowers, which made things even worse. Then it turned out that the purple flowers were called poison kisses, and Arya got a rash on her arm. Susanna would have thought the matter taught her a lesson, but Arya laughed about it, and the next day she rubbed mud all over her arms, like some ignorant bog woman, just because her friend McCann told her it would stop the itching. She had bruises on her arms and shoulders too, dark purple welts, faded green and yellow splotches. Susanna had seen them when her sisters undressed for sleep. Had she gotten those, only 7 gods knew. Arya was still going on, brushing out Nymeria's tangles and chattering about things she'd seen on the trek south. "Last week we found this haunting watchtower, and the day before we chased a herd of wild horses. You should have seen them run away when we caught the scent of Nymeria." The wolf wiggled in her grasp, and Arya scolded her. "Stop that! I have to do the other side. You're all muddy." "You're not supposed to leave the column," Susanna reminded her. "Father said so." Arya shrugged. I didn't go far, anyway. Nymeria was with me the whole time. I didn't go off either. Sometimes it's just fun to ride along the wagons and talk to people." Susanna knew all about the sorts of people Arya liked to talk to. Squires and grooms and servant girls, old men and naked children, rough-spoken free riders and uncertain birth. Arya would make friends with anybody. This McCann was the worst. A butcher's boar, 13 and wild. He slept in a meat wagon and smelled of slaughtering blocks. Just the sight of him was enough to make Susanna feel sick, but Arya seemed to prefer his company over hers. Susanna was running out of patience now. "You have to come with me," she told her sister firmly. "You can't refuse the Queen. Septim Ordain will expect you." Arya ignored her. She will give a hard yank with the brush. Nymeria growled and spun away, affronted. "Come back here." She's going to be lemon cakes and tea," Susanna went on, all adult and reasonable. Lady brushed against her leg. Susanna scratched her ear the way she liked, and Lady sat beside her on her hunches, watching Arya chase Nymeria. "Why would you want to ride a smelly old horse and get all sore and sweaty when you can recline on feather pillows and eat cakes with the Queen?" "I don't like the Queen," Arya said casually. Susanna sucked in her breath and shocked that even Arya would say such a thing, but her sister prattled on, heedless. She won't even let me bring Nymeria. She thrusted the brush under her belt and stalked her wolf. Nymeria watched her approach weirdly. A royal wheelhouse is no place for a wolf, Susanna said, and Prince Mercelia is afraid of them. You know that. Mercelia is a little baby. Arya grabbed Nymeria around her neck. For the moment, she pulled out the brush again, and the dire wolf wiggled free and bounded off. Frustrated, Arya threw down the brush. "Bad wolf," she shouted. Susanna couldn't help but smile a little. The kennel master once told her that an animal takes after its master. She gave Lady a quick little hug, and Lady licked her cheeks. Susanna giggled. Arya heard and whirled around, snarling. "I don't care what you say. I'm going out riding." Her long horse face got stubborn look that meant that she was going to do something willful. "Gods be true, Arya, sometimes you act like such a child." Susanna said, "I'll go by myself then. It will be ever so much more nicer that way. Lady and I will eat all the lemon cakes, and you'll just have the best time without you." She turned and walked off. But Arya shouted after, "They won't let you bring Lady either." She was gone before Susanna could think of a reply. Chasing Nymeria along the river, alone and humiliated, Susanna took the long way back to the inn, where she knew Septa Mordane would be waiting. Lady paddled quietly by her side. She was almost in tears. All she wanted was for things to be nice and pretty and the way they were in the songs. Why couldn't Arya be sweet and delicate and kind, like Prince Mercelia? Oh, Princess Mercelia. She would have liked a sister like that. Susanna could never understand how two sisters born only 2 years apart could be so different. It would have been easier if Arya had been a bastard like her half-brother John. She even looked like John, with the long face and the brown hair of the Starks. Nothing of a lady mother in her face or her coloring. And John's mother had been common, or so people whispered. When she was littler, Susanna had even asked her mother if perhaps there hadn't been some mistake. Perhaps the Grumptons had stolen her real sister, but her mother only laughed and said no. Arya was her daughter, and Susanna true-born sister, blood of the blood. Susanna could not think of why her mother would want to lie about it, so she supposed it had to have been true. As she neared the center of the camp, her distress was quickly forgotten, and the crowd had gathered around the queen's wheelhouse. Susanna had heard excited voices buzzing like hives in a bee. The door had been thrown open, and she saw the queen stood on top of the wooden steps, smiling down at someone. She had heard her saying, "The council does us great honor, my good lords." "What's happening?" she asked a squire she knew. "The council sent riders from the King's Landing to escort us to the rest of the way," he told her. "An honor guard for the king." Anxious to see Susanna let Lady clear a path through the crowd. People moved aside hastily for the direwolf. When she got closer, she saw 2 knights kneeling before the queen, in armor so fine and gorgeous that it made her blink. One knight wore the intricate suit of white emblem, scales brilliant as the field of new-fallen snow, with silver casings and clasps glittered in the sun. When he removed his helm, Susanna saw that he was an old man with hair as pale as his armor. Yet he seemed strong and graceful for that. From his shoulders hung a pure white cloak from the king's guard. His companion was a man near 20 whose armor was steel-plated of the deep forest green. He was the handsomest man Susanna has ever seen set eyes upon. Tall and powerful, made with jet black hair that fell on his shoulder and framed a clean-shaved face, and left green-eyed to match his armor. Laughing green eyes to match his armor. Cradled underneath one arm was an antlered helm, its magnificence racked shimmering in gold. At first Susanna did not notice the third stranger. He did not kneel to the others. He stood to one side, beside their horses, a gaunt, grim man who watched the proceeding in silence. His face was pockmarked and beardless, with the deepest eyes and the hollowest cheeks. Though he was not an old man, only a few wisps of hair remained on him. Sprouting above his ears were those who grown long as a woman's. His armor was an iron grey chainmail over layers of boiled leather. Plain and unarmed, it spoke of age and hard use. But his right shoulder had been stained leather hilt, and the blade strapped on his back was visible. The two-handed great sword, too long to be worn by his side. The knight is gone hunting. The king has gone hunting, but I know he will be pleased to see you when he returns, the queen was saying to the two knights who knelt before her. But Susanna could not take her eyes off the third man. He would seem to be a weight of her gaze. Slowly he turned his head. Lady seemed to feel the weight of her Lady growled, a terror of overwhelming as anything Susanna Stark has ever felt. Filled her suddenly. She stepped backward and bumped into someone. Strong hands grabbed her by the shoulders, and for a moment Susanna thought it was her father. But when she turned, it was the burned face of Sandor Clegane, looking down at her, his mouth twisted in a terrible mockery of a smile. "You are shaking, girl," he said, his voice raspy. "Did I frighten you so much?" He did, and had since she had first laid eyes on the ruin of the fire that had made his face, though it seemed to her now that he was not half so terrifying as the others. Still, Susanna wrenched away from him, and the hound laughed, and the lady moved between them, rumbling and warning. Susanna dropped to her knees and to wrap her arms around the wolf. They were all gathering around, gasping. She could feel their eyes on her, and here and there she heard muttering comments and tittering of laughter. "A wolf," a man said. Someone else said, "Seven hells, is that a dire wolf?" The first man said, "What's it doing in camp?" And the hound's raspy voice replied, "The Starks use him for wet nurse." And Susanna realized that the two stranger knights were looking down on her and the lady, swords in their hands, and then she was frightened again and ashamed. Tears filled her eyes. She heard the queen say, "Joffrey, go to her," and her prince was there. "Leave her alone," Joffrey said. He stood over her, beautiful in blue wool and black leather. His golden curls shined like in the sun like a crown. He gave her his hand and drew her to her feet. "What is it, sweet lady? Why are you afraid? No one will hurt you. Put your swords away, all of you. The wolf and her little pet, that is." He looked at Sandor Clegane, and then, "And you, dog, away with you. You're scaring my brethren." The hound had ever faithful, bowed and slid away quietly through the press. Susanna struggled to steady herself. She felt like such a fool. She was a Stark of Winterfell, a noble lady, and some day would be queen. "It was not him, my sweet prince," she tried to explain. "It was the other one." The two stranger knights exchanged a look. "Pinier?" juggled the young man in the green armor. The old man in the white spoke to Susanna gently. "Oftentimes Sir Island frightens me as well, sweet lady. He has a fearsome aspect." "As well as he should," the queen has decided from the wheelhouse. The spectres parted to make way for her. "If the wicked do not fear the king's justice, you have to put the wrong man in the office." Susanna finally found her words. "Then surely you have chosen the right one, your grace," she said, and the gale of laughter erupted around her. "Well spoken, child," the old man in the white, "as befits the daughter of Edward Stark. I am honoured to know you, however irregularly. The manner of our meeting, I am Sir Bastian Celamon, of the Kingsguard." He bowed. Susanna knew the name, and now the courtesies that Septim Ordain had taught her over the years had come back to her. "The Lord Commander of the Kingsguard," she said, "and the counsellor of Robert our King, and the Arians Tagarin before him. The honour is mine, good knight. Even if far north the singers praise of the deeds Baristan the bold." The great knight laughed again. "Baristan the old, you mean?" "Don't flatter him too sweetly, child. He thinks overmuch of himself already." He smiled at her. "Now, wolf girl, if you could put a name to me as well, then I must concede that you are truly our Han's daughter." Geoffrey stiffened beside her. "Have you a care how you address my brethren?" "I can answer," Susanna said quickly. "To quell her prince's anger." She smiled at the Green Knight. "Your helmet bears golden antlers, my lord. That is the sigil of the royal house. King Robert has 2 brothers. By the extreme youth you can only be Rylan Parthenon, Lord of the Storms, and the counsellor to the king, and so I name you." Sir Bastian chuckled. "By his extreme youth he can only pronounce jackanapes, and so I name him." There was a general laughter, led by the Lord Renline himself. The tension of the few moments ago was gone, and Susanna was beginning to feel comfortable, until Sir Eiland Payne shouldered 2 men aside and stood before her, unsmiling. He did not say a word. Lady bared her teeth and began to growl, a low rumble full of menace, but this time Susanna silenced her wolf as a gentle hand up to the head. "I am sorry I offend you, Sir Eiland," she said. And she waited for an answer, but none came. As the handman looked at her, his pale, colourless eyes seemed to strip the clothes away from her, and then the skin leaving her soul naked before him. Still silent, he turned and walked away. Susanna did not understand. She looked at her prince. "Did I say something wrong, your grace? Why will he not speak to me? Sir Eiland has not been feeling talkative these past 14 years. Lord Renlin commented with a sly smile. Geoffrey gave his uncle a look of pure loathing, and then took Susanna's hand by his own. Arian Tagarin had his tongue ripped out with a hot pincер. "He speaks most eloquently with his sword, however," the queen said, "and his devotion to our realm is unquestioned." Then she smiled graciously and said, "Susanna, the good counsellor, I must speak together until the king's return with your father. I fear we shall have to postpone your day with Marsilia. Please give your sweet sister my apologies. Geoffrey, perhaps you would be so kind to entertain our guests today." "It would be my pleasure, mother," Geoffrey said very formally. He took her by the arm and led her away from the wheelhouse, and Susanna's spirits took flight. The whole day with her prince, she gazed at Geoffrey's worshipful. He was so gallant, she thought, and the way he had rescued her from Sir Eiland and the Hound, the way it almost like the songs, like the time Sir Win of the Mirror Shield saved the Princess Daranisa from the giants, or Prince Aemon, the Dragonite champion, Queen Neryssa's honor against the evil Sir Magorlian Slender. The touch of Geoffrey's hand on his sleeve made her heart beat faster. What would you like to do? Be with you, Susanna thought, But she said, "Whatever you like to do, my prince." Geoffrey reflected on a moment. "We can go riding." "Oh, I love riding," Susanna said. Geoffrey glanced back at the lady, who was following at her heels. "Your wolf is liable to frighten the horse, and my dog seems to frighten you. Let us leave them both behind and set off our own. What do you say?" Susanna hesitated. "If you like," she said uncertainly. "I suppose I could tie up Lady." She did not quite understand, though. "I did not know you had a dog." Geoffrey laughed. "Oh, he's my mother's dog, and true. She had sent him to guard me, and so he does." "You mean the hound?" she said. She wanted to hit herself for being so slow. Her prince would have never loved her if she seemed so stupid. "It is safe to leave them behind." "Oh, is it safe to leave them behind?" Prince Geoffrey looked annoyed that she would even ask that. "Have no fear, lady. I am almost a grown man, and I don't fight with wood like your brothers. All I need is just this." He drew his sword and showed it to her. The long sword adroitly shrunk in the suit of the boy's 12. Gleamed blue steel, castle forged and double-edged with a leather grip, and the lion's head pommeled in gold. Susanna exclaimed over it admiringly. Geoffrey looked pleased. "I call it lion's tooth," he said. And so they left her, Direwolf and the bodyguard behind them, while they ranged east along the north bank of the Trident with no companions save Lord's Tooth. With no company save Lord's Tooth. It was a gracious day, a magical day. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of flowers, and the woods here had gentle beauty that Susanna had never seen in the north. Prince Geoffrey mount was a blood bay courser swift in the wind, and he rode it reckless, abandoned, so fast that Susanna was pressed to keep her mare. It was a day for adventures. They explored the caves by the river banks and tracked a Shadowkist to its lair. And when they grew hungry, Geoffrey found a holdfast by its smoke, and told them to fetch food and wine for the prince and his lady. They dined on trout fresh from the river, and Susanna drank more wine than she had ever drunk before. My father only let us have 1 cup, and one feast, and only at feasts, she confessed to her prince. My brethren can drink as much as he wants. Geoffrey said, refilling her cup, and then went more slowly after they had eaten. Geoffrey sung for her as they rode, his voice high and sweet and pure. Susanna was a little dizzy from the wine. Shouldn't we be starting back? She asked. Soon, Geoffrey said. The battlegrounds is right up ahead, where the riverbeds. There was my father. That is where my father killed Ragnar and Tagarin. You know. He smashed his chest, crushed right through his armor. Geoffrey swung an imaginary warhammer to show her how it was done. Then my uncle Jamie killed an old Aranese, and my father was king. What's that sound? Susanna heard it too, floating through the woods. A kind of wooden clattering. Snack, snack, snack. I don't know, she said. It made her nervous, though. Geoffrey, let's go back. I want to see what it is. Geoffrey turned his horse in the direction of the sound, and Susanna had no choice but to follow. The noises grew louder and more distinct. The clack of wood on wood, and they grew closer as they heard heavy breathing as well. And now and then a grunt. Someone's there, Susanna said anxiously. She found herself thinking of Lady, wishing that our wolf was with her. You're safe with me. Geoffrey drew his lion's tooth from its sheath, and the sound of steel and leather made her tremble. This way, he said, riding through the stands of trees. Beyond, in the clearing overlooked the river, and they came upon a boy and a girl playing as knights. at nights. Their swords were wooden sticks, broom handles, from the looks of them, and they were rushing across the grass, swinging at each other lustily. The boy was years older and a head taller and much stronger, and he was pressing an attack. The girl, scrawny little thing, in the soiled leathers, was dodging and managing to get her stick in the way. Most of the boy's blows, but not all. She tried to lunge him, and he caught her stick with his own, swept it aside, and slid his wood down hard on her fingers. She cried out and lost her weapon. Prince Geoffrey laughed, and the boy looked around wide-eyed and startled and dropped his stick in the grass. The girl glared at him, sucking on her knuckle to take the sting out, and Susanna was horrified. "Arya!" she called out in Credentiule. Lules. "Go away!" Arya shouted back at them, angry tears in her eyes. "What are you doing here? Leave us alone!" Geoffrey glanced at Arya to Susanna and back again. "Your sister," she nodded, blushing. Geoffrey exclaimed, the boy, an ungainly lad, with a coarse freckled face and thick red hair. "And who are you, boy?" he asked in a commanding tone that took no notice of the fact that other was his senior. "McCann," the boy muttered. He recognized the prince and averted his eyes. "My lord." "McCann, my lord." "He's the butcher's boy," Susanna said. "He was my friend," Arya said sharply. "Leave him alone." "A butcher's boy who wants to be a knight, is it?" Geoffrey swung down from his mountain, sword in hand. "Pick up your sword, butcher's boy," he said, his eyes bright with amusement. "Let us see how good you are." McCallan stood there, frozen with fear. Geoffrey walked toward him. "Go on, pick it up. Or do you only fight little girls?" "She asked me to, my lord," McCallan said. She asked me to." Susanna had only to glance at Arya to see the flush in her sister's face to know that the boy was telling the truth. But Geoffrey was in no mood to listen. The wine had made him wild. "Are you going to pick up your sword?" McCallan shook his head. "It's only a stick, my lord." "It's not a sword. It's only a stick. And you're only a butcher's boy, and no knight." Geoffrey lifted his lion's tooth and laid its point on McCallan's cheek below the eye, as the butcher's boy stood trembling. "That was my lady sister you were hitting. Do you know that?" The bright bud of the blooming blossoms were his swords pressed into McCallan's flesh, and the slow red line trickled down the boy's cheek. "Stop it!" Arya screamed. She grabbed up her fallen stick, and Susanna was afraid. "Arya, you stay out of this." "I won't hurt him much," Prince Geoffrey told Arya, never taking his eyes off the butcher's boy. Arya went for him. Susanna slid off her mirror, and she was too slow. Arya swung with both hands, and there was a loud crack as the wood split against the back of the prince's head. Then everything happened at once before Susanna's horrified eyes. Geoffrey staggered and whirled around, roaring curses. McCallan ran for the trees as fast as his legs would take him. Arya swung at the prince again, but this time Geoffrey caught the blow with the lion's tooth, and sent her broken stick flying from her hands. The back of his head was all bloody, and his eyes were on fire. Susanna was shrieking, "No, no, stop it! Stop it, both of you! You're spoiling it!" No one wants to... But no one was listening. Arya scooped up the rock and hurled it at Geoffrey's head. She hit his horse instead, and the blood bay reared and went galloping off after McCallan. "Stop it! Don't... Stop it!" Susanna screamed, and Geoffrey slashed at Arya with his sword, screaming Absentaries terrible words, filthy words. Arya darted back, frightened now, but Geoffrey followed, hounding her toward the woods, backing her against the trees. Susanna didn't know what to do. She watched helplessly amidst her blind from her tears. Then a grey blur flashed past her, and suddenly Nymeria was there, leaping, jaws closing around, Joffrey's sword arm, the steel fallen from his fingers, and the wolf knocked him off to his feet. They rolled onto the grass. The wolf snarled and ripped at him, the prince shaking in pain. "Get it off!" he screamed. "Get it off!" Arya's voice crackled like a whip. "Nymeria!" The direwolf let go of Joffrey and moved to Arya's side. The prince laid in the grass, whimpering, cradling his mangled arm. His shirt was soaked in blood. Arya said, She didn't hurt you much." She picked up the lion's tooth where it had fallen, stood over him, holding the sword with both hands. Joffrey made a scared whimpering sound as they looked up at her. "No," he said. "Don't hurt me. I'll tell my mother." "You leave him alone," Susanna screamed at her sister. Arya whirled and heaved the sword into the air, putting her whole body into the throw. The blue steel flashed in the sun as the sword spun over the river. It hit the water and vanished into a splash. Joffrey moaned, and Arya ran off to her horse, Nymeria lopping at her heels. After they had gone, Susanna went to Prince Joffrey. His eyes were closed in pain. His breath ragged. As Susanna knelt beside them, Joffrey, she sobbed. "Oh, look what they did. Look what they did, my poor prince. Don't be afraid. I'll ride the whole fast and bring you help for you." Tenderly she reached out and brushed back his soft blonde hair. His eyes snapped open and looked at her, and there was nothing but loathing there, nothing but the vilest contempt. "Then go," he spit at her, "and don't touch me."